On this week's episode, we're going to be talking about Adrian Newey's new official home, post-season rookie races, and changes, or more likely no changes, to the Flexiwing rules. Hello and welcome to another episode of Back of the Grid. I'm your host this week, Tom, and I'm joined by Chris.
Hello.
And by Stu.
Hello.
So, gentlemen, how have you found a week without Formula One? It feels like it's been a little while since we've had a weekend to ourselves to some degree.
There was no motorsport actually. There's always normally something going on, but I don't think there was anything going on.
Yeah, there was only international football going on as well, which was boring.
Yeah,
Nations League. Who cares about that?
Literally no one cares about Nations League.
Yeah, it was a pretty dull weekend for sport, but I went to a big barbecue and had a great time. So still feeling the effects of it now, actually.
Nice. I enjoyed a beer festival in town a little bit too much.
And I enjoyed a 30th birthday party for a friend far too much as well. So there we go. We all did something.
So we all had nice weekends.
Sunday was a write-off all round, basically.
Yeah.
Do you know who else had a fun weekend? Adrian Newey. Officially.
Yeah,
Still,
right now not official, but is it 10 o'clock tomorrow, I think? They've got a press conference, so by the time you're listening to this, it probably will be official.
Why on a Tuesday? Are they trying to avoid the Apple the Apple news? That's probably the iPhone 16 that's about to be announced as we record.
They're trying to avoid us being able to report on it on time as per usual.
Yeah,
but at least we know
Definitely.
that there's going to be a presentation, a press conference, whatever you want to call it, tomorrow anyway, after we've recorded. So we can at least somewhat prepare for it and somewhat cover it.
I love to think it was BBC said they'd because BBC have reported this as fact, and they said they contacted Aston Martin for comment, and the comment was something like Adrian Newey is a highly respected and talented member of the Formula One paddock, and any team would be extremely lucky to have his services. We have nothing to confirm at this time. Right, cool. You're just going to go out of your way to say some nice things about him, but definitely not signed him. No, not at all. It's a complete mystery still.
Yeah, Eddie Jordan as well was just flat out refuses to confirm what everyone already seems to know as well.
Because he's his
but
manager,
there's some,
isn't he?
Yeah, there's some legal thing in the agreement that he had with Red Bull. There's a very specific date where he wouldn't announce his new team until tomorrow, until Tuesday the 10th of September. For whatever reason, that's the very specific day that they chose was going to be the day that he's allowed to announce his new team. So, yeah, but I don't know what the logic behind that is. But
yeah, a bit bizarre, but
that's the sitch.
But yeah, apparently it's a 5-year deal worth up to 30 million a year, including bonuses, which is pretty sweet. He can't start until early March next year, for again contract reasons. But yeah, I mean it's a big old deal. Aston Martin have made a lot of big hires in recent years, but this is about as big as they get on the sort of non-driver side of things.
Well, I mean, yeah. For a Formula One team, I think other than any driver, hiring Adrian Newey would be the absolute top announcement that you could make, isn't it? Especially the top hire you could make, other than hiring Verstappen or Hamilton or your top dogs.
Absolutely. I mean, they've had some of the big ones. So they've got Andy Cowell, who was Mercedes engine chief. He's joining, I think, later this year as CEO. Enrico Cardal, who was the Ferrari chassis technical director, he's joining as CTO early next year, I think. They've already got Dan Fallows as their technical director, who was formerly an aerodynamicist at Red Bull, kind of as Adrian Newey's sort of number two. So it's a heck of a technical team they're building over there.
The Lance Stroll Championship is coming. It's a thing. It's real.
This is it, isn't it? Not to mention the enormous new factory and state-of-the-art wind tunnel they've built. I mean, credit to Lawrence Stroll. He said he was going to go in and turn them into a championship contender within, I can't remember how many years he said specifically, but I mean, he's doing all the right things, isn't he? Everything except the on-track performances right now seems to be.
Yeah, well, look, he's got Alonso. Alonso's staying until 2026, I believe.
I believe so, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's kind of like everything's kind of in place just at the right time now to really, hopefully, turn them into a real contender in 2026. Right, that surely has to be the theory. That has to be the thinking.
The trouble is everything's in place except half their driver lineup. Like, if he's doing all this to make his son world champion, he's either going to have to stack the deck in his son's favour or get rid of Alonso and hire a worse driver. Because, like, if they do everything right and have a championship winning car, Alonso is going to absolutely wipe the floor with Stroll. Unless
what do you reckon? Perez and Alonso swap out, maybe.
Latifi's coming back.
Latifi, all Canadian Aston Martin team.
Yeah,
it makes me wonder, going back to when Lawrence Stroll said what he said about how many years it'd take him to get competitive, if he's just like gone bang and just thrown the money at it because he's so close to that deadline. So I'd be interested to go back and see exactly what it was, but
I think like the slower approach. I don't think it's really a money thing. I think it's a getting all the pieces, slowly pulling all those pieces around from the chessboard that is the Formula One paddock and getting them into the right locations in order to make your team what you want it to be. You could have all the money in the world, if you don't have the personnel, then you're never gonna win anything, are you? So.
Well, yeah. When I say throwing money at it, I mean specifically that contract for Adrian Newey, so that they can get the right personnel.
What the crazy thing is though, like. 6 months ago, you would never have even given this a thought.
No, not at all.
It was only the start of the season, say 6 months ago, 8 months, 9 months ago, really now. January was when all the stuff sort of really started to kick off at Red Bull, wasn't it? But like without that, I don't know if Adrian Newey would have moved.
No, I don't think so. It's interesting sort of in comparison to Audi as well, because Audi very much started off like, we're going to come in, we'll take full control in 2026. And then I think originally, like within 2 or 3 years, they aimed to be competing for wins. And now all of a sudden they've like...
Good luck with that.
Panicked, bought into Sauber quicker than they planned, faffed around, and now they're like revising their plans and already had a massive change of personnel. So
we could do a whole episode on whatever's going on there. I think.
It's
an
mess.
Absolutely mental situation. They're having like they're not even a Formula One team yet technically, and they're having all of the issues that a HRT or a Caterham has or something like that. Do you know what I mean? Like all those kind of like struggles that really poor teams seem to have. And this is Audi?
Yeah.
So what is going wrong at Audi? Who knows?
Real mess. It's okay, Binotto's come back to rescue everything now.
Oh, yeah, Binotto, he's got a brilliant track record, doesn't he?
Are they putting the branding on the car for next year, or is
I
they
think
still
it's
waiting
going to
until
be
2026 for that?
I think they're keeping the kick stake thing next year, and then it's only going to be Audi once there's actually an Audi engine in the back of it.
I mean, for their own purposes, I can probably see why that would be the case.
The way they're performing right now, the further the Audi brand can be from that car, the better, I think.
I think so.
Yeah, what's the phrase? Win on Sunday, sell on Monday?
Yeah.
Don't about that. Yeah, can I say any more thoughts on Aston Martin or anything before we move on?
Not right now. I mean, the new wind tunnel is interesting. That should give them a good advantage. There's a theory that a lot of McLaren's performance boost that they've had has come from them having an absolutely brand new state-of-the-art wind tunnel in their factory. So I think that's definitely going to be a massive help. I think as they learn to, obviously getting a brand new wind tunnel, there's a learning curve as well because it's going to behave differently from your previous one, so there'll be quirks to figure out. But once they've got that done, there's no reason why they shouldn't be competing with the absolute best. These cars need the absolute, top aerodynamic tools to make them work the best and to make them correlate with what's going on the racetrack. So
and let's put it this way, they've just hired probably one of the best people possible to help them make sure that they get that right.
Yeah.
Well, providing that is the announcement tomorrow.
Yeah, we're making a pretty wild. I mean, I suppose it is widely reported as fact, so you can't blame us for making this assumption. But
I think when outlets like the BBC are reporting it as basically a done deal, I think I can generally trust that.
What you be like a contract extension for Lance Stroll now?
Oh my god, that would be so funny.
It is a
trolling everyone.
The
5-year deal for Lance.
Yeah.
I suppose the final piece of the Aston Martin puzzle, which is the sort of one of the things they can control the least, is that they're switching to Honda power units for 2026 as well.
Yes. But it's a proven engine. It's won a couple of world championships now.
It is. But it's, they've pretty much had Mercedes engines their entire existence, haven't they?
Yes.
Even back as Force India, I think they ran Mercedes engines.
They did.
So, building a car around a new engine is a challenge.
It's going to be different.
And it's, bringing new people in. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what Honda can come up with. But as you say, they've been pretty successful so far.
Yeah, obviously it's going to be a different power unit from 2026 as well. So, however this power unit is doing now, isn't necessarily an indication of what the next generation of power unit is going to be. You don't know what kind of issues different teams are going to come up against. I would theorise that Ferrari have probably got something half decent in the tank, given that Hamilton's gone over there.
Yeah.
But you just don't know until you see them out on track. You don't know what kinds of reliability issues and power issues. Goodness knows what else can go wrong with these things. They're
the talk around Mercedes is that they are quite confident about it. I mean, Williams have very much stuck with Mercedes going forward because they've expressed their belief in their power unit. So you just don't know, do you? With the new power unit regulation, you just don't know until they're on track. Yeah.
Which is why it's so exciting.
Yeah,
because it's a whole new formula. It's the first time in so long that the entire formula has been completely shaken up. Normally you'll do like just the engine and leave the aero platform the same, or normally you'll just do the aero platform, leave the engine the same. In recent sort of formula changes, that's the way they've done it. And this time is just going to be all new. So there's going to be reliability issues. There's going to be all kinds of... I'll be amazed if there aren't like lots and lots of retirements those first few races this time around. I've said that every time they've changed the formula, and they've always been bulletproof, weirdly, but I don't think that'll be the case.
No, I don't think so.
I'd say that engine-wise, they might be a bit more reliable than you think, just because, if anything, they are simplifying things. So
it's older technology, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a simplification technically of what we've got. They're just adjusting the balance a bit. So I'd guess that the reliability that they can get out of them is going to be the same, if not better. But yeah, it'd be very interesting to see like how many issues get generated by the new aero in comparison with that, because it's like you said, they're having to focus 2 development streams at once essentially in order to get a car ready for 2026. So you might end up like cutting a corner, or being a little bit loose with time that you spend on that engine, thinking that you're safe because of how similar it is, and actually run into a problem with it. It's entirely feasible that you could actually do that by thinking that it is too safe and being a little...
I think the advantage that maybe a team like Aston Martin have got, and definitely a team like Audi have got going into 2026, is they have that bit more testing time, CFD time, and wind tunnel time because of the way the rules are now than say your really big dogs like McLaren, Red Bull, Mercedes, Ferrari. So that's where I think that's the one saving grace maybe for Audi, is that they're going to be at the bottom of the pile. Yeah. So they're going to have all of the development time. They're going to be absolutely maxed out on development time. So at least they'll have that in their back pocket, and they'll be able to hopefully develop quite quick if they can get the right brains using that development time.
Yeah.
Right, should we move on to rookie races?
Yeah, let's.
This is a really interesting one, actually. There's a proposal that's being discussed with the F1 Commission meetings at the moment. F1 Commission being representatives from all of the teams, as well as the FIA and FOM, to hold a post-season race in Abu Dhabi specifically for rookie drivers. The thinking being it's an opportunity to give rookies more F1 experience, show their potential in a race environment without risking cars and equipment in the middle of a Formula One championship, because obviously doing this mid-season, someone bins it and then the Grand Prix driver can't actually take part would be a big old no-no. And yeah, according to Toto Wolff, basically everyone's on board. FIA from all the teams are very much behind the idea, so it's sounding like this may well go ahead. The biggest kind of argument against it right now is that you're asking all of the team personnel to basically do another race on top, like tagged onto the end of the longest season in F1 history, which is a big ask. At least they're doing it. They're already there. Everything's already set up. So it's kind of, it's running a few more sessions and delaying taking stuff down by a few days versus having to do a full build and takedown. But
I think if they can factor it in properly to what's already happening when you have the young driver test at the end of the season, like
that's true.
The majority of the drivers that would be doing the young drivers tests are generally going to be people that you would probably put in this rookie race. I suppose it depends on how they if they caveat them in a similar way, because I feel like last year or the year before we saw Fernando Alonso end up in a young driver's test somehow, which however that worked I can't remember from at the time.
It was a quirk of the rules, like if a driver hasn't been in a car for a certain length of time, they're considered a rookie again. I think
it was something weird like that. But like I think as long as they use it for the proper purposes rather than something like that, most of the drivers are going to be the same anyway, if not all of them. And I don't know, maybe they just do slightly less sessions in that testing and convert one of them into the race, which means that there's not actually that much time added to it. And
if anything, if they did it as a normal race weekend, it'd be less. They'd get a lot less time, a lot less seat time. That's the strange thing. I think like, normally in a test day you have a 4-hour morning session, then another 4-hour afternoon session, I think, or it might be 3 and 3. I'm not sure. But even then, that's like 6 hours in one day of running time. Normally, these tests last a couple of days. So, if you've got 2 young drivers going in each car, you're guaranteed 6 hours for each of those drivers to get their eye in. Whereas on a race weekend, I guess you've got practice 1 hour, 2 and 3. That adds up to 3 hours. Oh God, I'm doing maths again on this podcast. You're qualifying less than an hour, really, of seat time. So we're up to 4 hours, and then race might be 2 hours. So you're back up to 6 hours. Race might be 2 hours, might be an hour and a half.
I suppose what you could do is have the normal one-day test, and then the next day just go straight into qualifying and do a race. Like there's no need to do another set of practice sessions if they've spent a whole day testing.
But this is look. Let's not give them too much credit. This is Formula One. If they're going to do a race weekend, they're just going to want to run it in the same way that you'd run a race weekend, because they're going to be uncomfortable. They struggle enough to make the start lights work when it rains a lot of the time. So mixing up a format of a race weekend for this rookie testing, I feel like would be a little bit of a big ask, quite a big ask for them to change the format around to suit that.
I suppose you could maybe set it up like do 3 practice sessions on a Friday and then qualifying a race on a Saturday, just to do the same format but compressed a little bit or something like that. Like, there's ways of doing it for sure.
You could extend the practice sessions as well. You could make the practice. You could say have 2-hour practice sessions to give them 4 hours of practice, or an hour and a half for each practice session, like the good old days.
Yeah,
I think it's a good idea though. Like there's so with the testing rules as they are, there's so little potential time for rookie drivers to get F1 seat time, at least in like recent machinery. And it makes sense that it is like that for testing purposes. But and I think as well, like Formula 2 the last few years has very much proven that it's not, in many ways, it's not fit for purpose. Like we had a season like whatever year it was when the top 3 were Russell, Norris and Albon, and they all graduated to F1 drives. The vast majority of years since then, not that many champions have actually got seats. Like, next year we've got Antonelli and Bearman getting F1 drives. Like, they are finishing well down. Like,
yeah, but that's I think that's more Prima than it is Antonelli and Bearman.
it is, but like, you know, look to previous years as well. You know, like Drugovich was champion. All he's done is sat on the sidelines at Aston Martin. He's probably never getting near a seat. Like,
yeah. Jack Doohan next year, he's a rookie. He'll be back.
Yeah, he's kind of proven that you can sit around long enough and you'll get one. But
and potentially Lawson as well to some degree in that.
Sort of, yeah. But I think F1 teams are definitely way more interested in what drivers do in F1 machinery than what they've done in Formula 2.
Yeah, I think that's why this serves its purpose, doesn't it? And I think, you know, albeit it'd only be one race and it'd be against like their existing peers rather than the potential grid they'd race against, but ultimately it is that opportunity to show that you can race in an F1 car as well, because that's not necessarily the easiest thing to translate across from F3 and F2 into F1, as you sometimes see with these rookie drivers when they come through, and you know, those first seasons are sometimes a big adjustment process. So to have the opportunity, and I think the one thing that you probably got to praise FOM and FIA together for is that they are trying to find more ways to almost force a team's hand into putting these drivers in the F1 cars more often and expose them to them more, so that when they do come through, they actually have a better chance at, you know, competing with the drivers that are already there, that have already got the experience behind the wheel. Because you only have to look at a few seasons ago, and we didn't even have the situation where like so many of the FP1 sessions should be done by rookie drivers or young, you know, people considered young drivers, or with under so many races, like, because I think Bearman still counts even though he's done a sub in that kind of thing.
But the point remains rookie drivers.
You know, drivers who are not experienced in the formula. And yeah, fair enough, there is an argument that, you know, you're taking that session away from a seasoned driver, but on the same side, the seasoned drivers very rarely notice the difference from missing an FP1 session. So I think that, like, sort of credit where it's due to FOM and FIA for things like this, and that, you know, at least tabling these ideas, because it's a nice way to help these rookies transition in, because an F1 car is a completely different animal to an F3 and an F2 car. And I know that they're trying to bring some of the newer regulations down into F2, and F3 is getting a remodel for next season, I think it is. There's a new aero package for F3, a new car. So, like, that's, again, trying to bring it a bit closer, but it would never anywhere near the same, because of the sheer difference in budgets between the series. Like, it's not ever going to get anywhere close. So I think, like I say, credit where it's due for them at least trying to give these rookies as much of a chance as possible for when they are offered these seats, or to a chance to put themselves in the shop window for, you know, a big team to maybe look at them from a little bit of a different side and go, do you know what, that's an impressive performance, let's take a chance on this guy, or whatever that might look like.
And also put in 20 unknown quantities in 20 Formula 1 cars.
Like seeing...
Sounds like great fun.
It sounds like chaos, but just like seeing what the running order's like with a different set of drivers in those same cars would be fascinating. Like, I'd love to see it.
I think that's the really interesting thing, is like mixing up the driver, putting different drivers in cars that we've seen perform a certain way all season. It'll really show you the difference I think a driver can make in a car.
Yeah,
absolutely.
On a completely, regardless of like their level of experience. Part of it is like how easy is a car to drive, and I'm sure you'll still see your Red Bulls. Well, maybe not your Red Bulls at the moment, but your McLarens, your Ferraris going quite quick, and probably your Red Bulls as well. Let's be fair, and probably your Mercedes as well. But maybe that top four would get jumbled up that bit more by the different levels of the drivers that end up in them.
And then you maybe get just like a superstar and a random thing like a Sauber that's just like at the front, and you're like, wow, we've not seen this all season.
Out of interest, I just looked up the young driver FP1 list for this season, like just see who has and hasn't done it. There's a couple of really interesting things. One is that Williams have now filled their quota, because Colapinto in Monza still counted as a rookie driver. So
Colapinto, doesn't it?
Colapinto already did Silverstone, and now he's done his second. But Ferrari are still down as having none, even though Bearman drove for them, because the rules specifically say it's FP1. So, because I think Bearman did FP3, didn't he, and then qualifying. So they still doesn't count for him.
Yeah, well, they'll get it this weekend.
Oh,
It's a nice segue.
Well, no, actually, Haas have already got both of theirs.
Oh, Haas. Sorry,
Yeah,
Haas
yeah.
have got Bearman, not Ferrari, of course.
Haas have already run Bearman twice, and they'll be running him again this weekend because, as we suspected, Bearman is going to be Magnussen's replacement for this weekend while Magnussen is serving his race ban.
I'm surprised that race ban's not been sort of let go. I feel like
Here's the thing. If you're Haas and you've just watched one of your drivers, let's face it, not do a whole lot to write home about all season, and suddenly you're presented with a chance to give your driver for next year a sort of no pressure practice weekend, I don't think you're going to be that mad about it.
Yeah,
maybe, but let's not forget what Magnussen has done for that team throughout this year. Like, he has been instrumental in them getting some of the points that they've got. He's been holding, and a lot of the reason he's accrued some of these points is because he's been playing the team game. So I don't think that's fair.
you shouldn't have got the penalty points, though. You would argue.
Yeah,
as
but
well,
he's got the penalty points because of the team, though. A lot of the time, because they're telling him to do this, do that, and he's driven a way that they've determined will get them points. And I suppose, look, there's always more to these things, but I don't think that would be very. What you're suggesting, I don't like. I don't think it'd be very fair.
I can see what you're saying. Yes, they asked him to play the team game, but can I swear? Do you mind editing in a bleep, Tom?
Go on, let me do a timestamp. Swear away.
I don't think that level of shithousery should be rewarded. That's my feelings on Magnussen's driving this season.
I might leave that in, to be fair.
It's shithousery that the team have asked him to do, though.
They asked him to hold people up. They didn't ask him to push
Yeah,
people off the road. And, I don't know.
Yeah, but they haven't. When that's happened before, it's happened multiple times. So obviously the team is complicit. They haven't disciplined him for doing that, have they?
Yeah.
The other side of it, though, is that if they let him take the penalty, they not only get to run their driver for next year, like Chris is saying, but they also get a fresh set of penalty points to start.
Oh yes, Magnussen's just.
So
off
Magnussen
the
could
hook
just start doing it again for the rest of the season.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me. So maybe it is. I mean, well, there's the more to it, isn't? That's the more that this has to it. Then if they're refreshing the points, serve your race ban, start again, and you get the added bonus of running your new driver for next year, then it is win-win-win for Haas.
You think
Haas,
Magnussen's been bad so far? Just you wait for the last few races of this
season.
Goodness. Can he speedrun a second ban before the end of the year, do you think?
Yeah.
I mean, it's plausible with the number of races we've got left.
Worth noting as well that F2 are racing in Baku this weekend, so Bearman will obviously be sitting that one out. He's going to be replaced at Prema by Gabriele Mini, who very narrowly missed out on the F3 title in Monza, so it'll be cool to see him in F2 machinery. I say narrowly missed out. He did get disqualified after the race, so the gap ended up being a lot bigger than it would have been. It actually probably saved the FIA some blushes, because if he had won the championship on track and then been disqualified, that would have been extremely awkward.
We've actually only got F1 and F2 this weekend, haven't we? I don't think there's any other support.
No, F3's done now. And
there's
Porsche,
I don't think they ever run the Porsche Super Cup.
Yeah, I think they only do the European rounds.
Yeah.
Although I did see that
F1 Academy.
No Academy either. I don't think.
I think Academy might be doing COTA again, possibly. No, they're doing Singapore, I think, which is bizarre.
Oh, that'd be rad.
I did read the other day that Vegas has actually got a support race this year. They've got some Ferrari GT3 challenge thing going around, so they can clean the track for the F1 cars. Right, shall we have a chat about Flexiwings?
If you want.
This has reared its head again.
Yeah, you've got a lot written down here for this, and I don't know how much.
It's mostly rambling. So
it's a long way to say the FIA have decided they're not going to do much about it, I think. But I'll let Chris go through
it. Did you guys see the comparisons of the onboards in Monza?
I saw some onboards. I didn't see any comparisons, but I did see some onboards.
Yeah,
and I did notice there was a lot of lean back on the McLaren's flaps.
it's impossible to deny that the McLaren and Mercedes front wings are flexing much more than the rest of the field under high speed. Red Bull, Williams, and Ferrari, at least they're the ones we know about. I suspect most of the teams have raised concerns about this to the FIA. The FIA, they actually updated the load tests before Spa, I think it might have been, and have said they basically said no teams are falling outside the rules currently. They said the FIA has the right to introduce new tests if irregularities are suspected. There are no plans for any short-term measures, but we are evaluating the situation with the medium and long term in mind.
Yeah, well, they put new cameras on the cars to measure it. This is a thing they've been measuring for a number of races now. It's not new. This has been going on a while, isn't it? Because they said at the outset of this whole thing that they were going to be monitoring it so that they can make changes in the future if they need to.
Yeah. Obviously, the teams that don't have them are kicking up a fuss, as is normally the case. Like, we can't do that, so we're going to complain about it.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I think they've got a point. Like, if you watch the amount they're flexing, it's excessive. They've clearly been designed to do that. Like, as I said before, nothing is infinitely rigid. There's always going to be some level of flex, but the degree to which they're doing it does seem excessive, and I don't think it's an accident that the two teams doing that are the ones that have made big strides recently.
But it's not new technology, though, is it?
No, I mean, ultimately the problem's the test, isn't it? If the test for the wings is something that they've passed, but visually you can see that they've found a way to essentially build for and pass the test, but still get the advantage, then the problem is the test, and the test needs updating. It's the same as, I don't know, what else have we had recently? Like the braking thing that we've talked about in recent episodes. With, something's been identified somewhere, whether a team's been using it or not, but a way to circumvent a regulation due to the wording of it or the test in place, whatever the reason might be, has come about. So you need to close that loophole and by changing the test or changing the word in the regulations or whatever it is that it might be.
Or, in the words of Christian Horner, the teams who don't have it need to change their effing cars then.
Well, that's probably what's going to happen now. I can see Red Bull's frustration, though, because you look at 2021, there was so much talk about the Red Bull front wing flexing.
Yeah,
the FIA,
there was.
Yeah, and the FIA continually said they're not there, it's fine, it's passing all their tests. But then mid-season, despite it never failing a test, the FIA changed the rules around front wings and changed how they were doing the load tests. So for that to have happened in the past and then this year the FIA to go, no, it's fine, we'll maybe look at it for next year. Like, that very much feels like... It's not surprising that the FIA have taken this completely different approach for no apparent reason. But
the FIA are happy that for the first time in a couple of seasons, it's got a bit of a mixed bag for the win, probably. Unfortunately, this is the problem with the way the FIA police their own rules and regulations. Is ultimately they can kind of do whatever they want, and if they deem that they don't want to change something mid-season or deem that they do want to change mid-season, it's kind of, there's no one to stop them from doing that. Realistically,
it's hard not to sort of take that cynical viewpoint. Is it like, if McLaren were doing this and they'd been dominating from race one, would they still turn a blind eye to it, or would they want to do something to maybe pull them back and close up the field a little bit? Like,
the field is quite nicely closed up at the moment, isn't it?
So
it'd be such a shame to change the rules and have that change.
Yeah.
But back in 2021 where the rear wings were all flexing and they put dots all over the rear wings and the cameras mounted to the chassis to monitor that. So, it's not just Red Bull that have had it in the neck on this sort of thing before. Like Ferrari and Mercedes.
Completely.
Yeah, Ferrari were a big proponent of the dots on the rear wings, weren't they? When that was a thing.
Yeah, so I don't know. What goes around comes around, right? It's Formula One. These things affect it over the years. Like, these things affect each and every one of the teams in different ways. You win some, you lose some, and they did all sorts to slow Mercedes down when Mercedes were
completely
were leading.
Yeah,
but that's the thing, they did, and this time they're just not, which I find very. I don't know. It seems very just like, with this time we're gonna think about it.
This time we'll just let it go because the field's nice and
completely
close together.
It'd be interesting to see
the
how
show's
many
good,
teams...
so we'll leave it as it is.
Yeah. It'd be interesting
Which
to see
I'm
how
okay
many
with.
teams think
I'm totally
it's
fine
worth
with it. Sorry,
spending
Tom. Chris. Go on.
I'll be interested to see how many teams now think it's worth spending the time and money to develop their own wings that can do that, given how deep into the season we are.
I think the ones that have wind tunnel time left and resource left to do that for this season, I think definitely most of them will, because this rule set's not really changing going into next year. So anything you add onto the car at the end of this season, if you're sticking with your concept for next year, which they'll know whether or not roughly by now, they ought to know by now if they're sticking with the concept or not for next year, then anything you can pile onto this car will apply next year and will just be a continuation, hopefully, for a lot of the teams. And hopefully it stays as close as it is as well, because it's been fantastic so far this year.
Right. Should we talk about Baku?
Yeah, let's do some storylines for Baku. Who wants to take them? Shall I take them?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Right, so obviously given recent times and the fall away from Red Bull, or maybe the leapfrogging of the other teams, how bad do we think this is actually going to be for them? They appear to genuinely be the fourth fastest car, and we've had a week away, but have they really been able to do enough to reclose that gap and be part of the fight for Azerbaijan, or do we think they're going to be in the same sort of place going into this weekend?
Yeah, I think a week's a very short period of time. A week off is a very short period of time to have fixed what looks like the kind of issues they've got. I think when they're talking about a front and rear that are disconnected from one another after a series of updates, and the number of they've brought updates pretty much every race, Red Bull. So when you've got to go back and trace back through each of those updates to figure out where things have gone awry, then that's not the work of a moment. That's going to take them some time to test on track to figure this out, and all this time they're testing on track, trying to figure out where they have gone wrong. They're obviously not adding pace to the car because they're trying to effectively figure out reliability, aerodynamic stability, drivability, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, I think they if I was at Red Bull, I'd be very, very, very worried at this stage in the season, the way things are looking.
I think especially given that it's like we're moving into the non-European season now. Like if this was, Italy followed by Austria or, Germany or something, you've got a lot more time to do stuff and get parts out there. When you've got to get everything from Monza to Baku and then also try to fix the car, like it's a big ask.
And then it's how many CFD runs you got left, how many wind tunnel runs you got left to solve these problems when you do find them, So they're in a pickle. There's no doubt in my mind that Red Bull are in a real pickle for the rest of this season. I don't think these problems are going to get completely solved before the end of the season. I think there's going to be a lot of compromise coming through, and it's going to take a hell of a season for Max Verstappen for him to keep hold of this championship. I think I really do think both championships, well, obviously the constructors very much at risk, but I do believe the drivers is also a real high risk for them. I don't think it's a done deal at all.
I totally understand why all of the wind tunnel and CFD usage is a secret, but I would love that information to be surfaced, like to actually know how much of each team's allocation they've got through at any point in time. It would be fascinating to know.
I do believe at some point I can see in the future of F1 for the discourse of Formula One. I think it's an interesting topic. I think it's something that is worth being in the public domain for people to know how much development is left in these cars, because the development of a Formula One car across a season is a huge narrative going across a season, and I'm absolutely sure the way Formula One management is and the people that work there will be absolutely itching for that data to be out in the public domain, so they can have more people talking about another part of Formula One that they haven't yet spoke about that often.
So. I mean, we already have like the teams have to present what it is they've upgraded on the car on a weekly basis now, which is like that would have been unheard of in not many years ago. So
yeah. Out of interest, at what point do you think Red Bull potentially look at going back to the pre-European stint car? Because obviously an element of this is other teams upgrading and catching them, but it feels like from comments Verstappen's made recently with the balance of the car that part of it is also them developing themselves into the whole. Yeah. At what point do you think Red Bull consider rebuilding the car to, like, say, pre-Europe Imola kind of spec, where admittedly the McLaren would have possibly won that race, but Max, like, still, like, they were still on par with each other at that point.
Yeah.
Do they go back that far? And because
I'll tell you what point. About 2 weeks ago. That's when.
The end of Monza, that's what
the end of the Italian Grand Prix.
Yeah.
That performance was abysmal by Red Bull standards. That's when you do it. I think the most sensible course of action to them maybe at this point would be to run back to back, give Verstappen for FP1 the current car and Perez the old car, and then switch it round. Have Perez in the new car and Verstappen in the old car, and then just see if you can figure it out from there.
Yeah. I mean, I agree, but like I think that they're at a point now where if the car is as bad as they're saying, and that's not just media smoke and mirrors whilst they're working on whatever they're working on, I would genuinely be considering, well, why don't we go back to a previous iteration that we at least understood? And
the pre-Imola car, it was Imola when they started to have issues.
Let's put it this way, like, if they do that and McLaren is still ahead of them, but Verstappen can be coming second and third behind the likes of Norris, it changes how difficult that title is to defend. If they're going to keep coming 5th, 6th, 7th in races, that gap's going to close pretty quick and it won't be enough. So, yeah, I'd agree that if they haven't already thought about doing it, they're probably very close to doing so. Yeah. Speaking of changes around Monza, Ferrari, the upgrades seem to put them back on the pace with the other front-running teams, get them back up with the likes of McLaren, obviously winning the race. Is that the traditional Ferrari always building a car that will run well at Monza and it's a flash in the pan, or do we think that these are upgrades that could see them contending like into a race like Baku, considering it's also got like long straights and so on, and going into the rest of the season?
Well, they weren't strictly the fastest car, were they, at Monza? It was just the way the tyre wear worked out for them worked really, really nicely. It was kind to its tyres. I think Leclerc drove a fantastic race. I think a lot of that was... I think it was more Leclerc than the car on this occasion.
I think it was aided by that car. I think all season it has been, but particularly at Monza, that car was very, very good at getting out of slow speed corners, which made it a very hard car to overtake. So I think at Baku and Singapore, that's probably going to suit them pretty well, because there's a lot of slow 90 degrees, struggle to get the power down type corners. So I can see the Ferrari being pretty decent in Baku, I think.
Yeah, I think you definitely put it between the McLaren and the Ferrari, I would say, for this, I think so, for pole for this weekend and for the race win. I think it's going to be really, really tight between those two teams.
And this all segues nicely because you mentioned McLaren. Do we start seeing team orders from them this weekend if things aren't playing in their favour championship-wise?
Chris, do you want to go first, or shall I go first?
There's been so much speculation about this. Who was it I read earlier?
I mean, at the end of the last race, they said they were considering it.
There's the speculation that Piastri has something in his contract about not being able to impose team orders unless certain conditions. I find that hard to believe, to be honest.
I don't. Mark Webber's his manager.
Yeah, exactly.
Webber,
multi-21, Mark. Multi-21.
If it is, then McLaren are even more short-sighted than I thought they were, because it's just giving the drivers too much power. Like, as much as the drivers are the ones in the car. Like, no driver should be bigger than the team, and I think McLaren would get themselves to a bit of an issue there. I think I can see a situation this weekend when the McLarens are maybe running second and third and fourth with Piastri ahead, and they ask them to swap. I think if Piastri's leading a race, I don't think they're going to ask him to give it up.
Yeah, I think that's the difficulty they've got, isn't it? Because they're right at the sharp end, and no one of them looks particularly any worse than the other one.
Yeah.
Then, if one of them's about to earn a race win, then they deserve that race win. It's a lot harder to swap them round when it's for either a podium or a win. But no, let's say this: it's a lot harder to swap them round for a win than it is for a mere podium.
Look at Hungary. Look at the way that unfolded. I think you see it up and down the grid as well. Like, not just at McLaren, and anywhere that it's ever been a thing. Trying to get Bottas to give up a win for Lewis back in the day, or something like that. Like, it's much easier to persuade that driver to give up fifth for sixth or something, because there's no huge glory associated to the two. At the end of the day, no one's probably going to remember swapping a fifth for a sixth. Or
no.
I mean, you see the Alpines doing it over trying to chase final point for 10th or something. People aren't going to remember that in years to come. But the wins, people still talk about the times when Bottas let Hamilton through for a win. They stick with people. I think that probably is the big difference, isn't it? It's when it's for a win, it's much harder, and that's why we saw what we saw in Budapest. But then if you were swapping second for third for help with a championship fight, then it's probably a little bit more manageable and a little bit of an easier situation.
Here's a interesting question: what's easier to swap, second and third, or is it easier to swap third and fourth around? Because obviously you've got the podium factor there.
Yeah.
Are you going to cost someone a podium for another person's championship? Whereas second and third, you still get the podium, right? So I would argue it's less of a impact.
Possibly. I think it's similar to the race win thing, but maybe not quite as
drastic.
As detrimental for the other driver. But
But I suppose neither of them want swapping around anyway, do they? And
no,
to be fair to Norris has himself said he doesn't want that. He would rather go out there and earn his wins and earn his points and not be assisted by the team, which I think is absolutely fair enough. I think if you're going to win a world championship, yes, he's going to need a lot of support from the team, but I think it says more about him if he can win it without the support of the team. And I think that's a much harder earned championship if he does on the off chance get there. But I think the way it's looking for Red Bull at the moment, I wouldn't completely write off Leclerc yet.
Yeah,
it's so tight, isn't it? The championship.
I think it's going to come right back down. I think we're going to get another sort of 2012 situation where you get to the end of the season, there's 3 or 4 drivers who can.
What's the gap for Leclerc at the minute? 80 something points.
Something like that. Yeah.
It's big.
It's big, but I guess it's not insurmountable, is it? If things keep going as they were.
303, Norris 241, Leclerc 217. So
okay, so
Leclerc's about 40 points back.
Oh no,
from
Norris. From Norris, yeah, not even 40 from Norris.
No, he's 20, 23, 24 off Norris.
Oh, he was 40. I think he was recently. He was 40.
Obviously,
my brain.
Right now, I think weirdly, there's probably more chance of Leclerc taking second off Norris than there is Norris taking first off Verstappen, especially if the Ferrari carries on performing well.
I would put those odds at even. I think by Abu Dhabi. Here's my wild prediction for Abu Dhabi that I'm making in September 2024. I reckon by Abu Dhabi it could go one of 3 ways. I think they're all 3 of them will be really, really close together on points, because Verstappen is going to potentially not be scoring anything like the amount of points he's been scoring at the start of the season. If he's going to be getting a few sort of finishing lower than, say, 4th a few races in a row, that lead just disappears really quick. And if you've got Norris, Leclerc, and maybe even Piastri all nicking wins off of each other, then that would probably do. I haven't done the maths on this yet, but off the top of my head, it feels as though the 3 of them just close up enough to all three be in contention in the final race, with probably a Verstappen slight advantage.
Yeah, it's totally possible.
Yeah.
I mean, Piastri's only 20 back from Leclerc. Like, it's...
Yeah.
It's
I
very close.
think that might... I mean, I'm already stretching it with Leclerc, so I think
Yeah.
Piastri might be a
Piastri
bridge.
I mean,
Championship
it's over 100 points for
Yeah.
Piastri, so I think that is definitely stretching it at that point. In other areas, what about Ollie Bearman? Obviously, it's his second attempt in a Formula One car, albeit a slightly different one to last time. But do we think he might have a chance at maybe points again, like he got with the Ferrari? The Haas has had its moments this season. Hulkenberg took a fair few points as the season's gone, and I mean even Magnussen's got a handful. So, do we think Bearman can maybe stretch ahead of Magnussen, because they're tied for points at the minute from his Ferrari performance?
That'd be hilarious.
Yeah, I think they could. I think he could, Bearman. I think he could get points this weekend. I don't see why not.
He's very good there. Like I said last week, I think F2 last year, he basically did a clean sweep of practice qualifying on both races. And he's, he's coming off the back of a win in his last F2 race as well, last F2 weekend. So, I mean, I'm really interested to see what he can do, because obviously we've had drivers like De Vries before who've turned up, done one race, and was like, oh, this guy's great. And then by race 2, it's like, oh, is he that good? So I don't think that's going to happen with Bearman. But I'm interested to see what he can do in lesser machinery.
Yeah, I think both him and Antonelli have both got the goods. So I'm excited to see what Bearman can do this weekend, and I am looking forward to as ridiculous as Antonelli's run was in the Mercedes at Monza. I'm still excited to see how he can go across the season.
And then the last one quickly before I move to predictions. Do we think Perez can maybe get a result here? He's always gone fairly well at Baku, generally speaking. Do we think, despite the Red Bull's performance, he can maybe get some kind of decent result for them?
Well, will team orders come into play for Red Bull this weekend? Will we get Perez ahead of Verstappen, and then
not impossible.
Red Bull going, hang on a minute, let's swap you guys around because Verstappen needs every point he can get at this stage.
Yeah, this won't do.
I mean, that wouldn't surprise me at all if it
and
did
then
come
and
to
then
that.
But then to add extra spice to that, what is Perez's response to that? Does he let that go, or because he's probably not going to be driving at Red Bull next season, so he's probably going to be thinking, you know what, I'll do it. I don't have a drive next season anyway. For all, I mean, technically, I suppose he does, but
he has a contract. But as we know, by many years of following Formula One, that doesn't mean anything.
We've been doing this podcast long enough to know that those contracts ain't worth the paper they're written on.
Yeah.
I would love to see them put team orders in on Perez and then be quicker, and him just be like, nah, fam.
That would be very good. You would definitely answer the question, wouldn't it, of whether he's going to be in the seat next year.
Yeah.
Anything for you to add on that one, Chris?
No, I don't think so. I mean, if Perez can't perform here, then he's not going to perform anywhere, is he? So it's an important weekend for him, I think.
Very blunt response there.
It's
If he can't do
true,
it here,
though,
he's not doing it anyway.
This is by far his best track.
Yeah, it's definitely up there for him. I don't know if it actually would statistically be his most successful track. It quite possibly would be.
We've actually got a really interesting question about Perez, which I think might be worth, just before we do predictions, going into, just while we're on topic of Perez.
I mean, it's the only piece of inbox we've got this week. So, should we dive into inbox slightly earlier than usual?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do that first.
I'll do it justice as well, and I'll even give it the jingle.
Keep it saying now. Stay out. Box. Hey, man.
Shall I take this?
You go for it, because you brought it up.
Charlotte Taylor says, do you think Red Bull kept Perez because they knew the car was bad and that it wasn't him it wasn't necessarily him under-delivering? Can't speak. Under-delivering.
Are you sure you want to take this one?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe I'm having my regrets. It's been a long time since I've done this. Not necessarily him under-delivering, just struggling with a tricky car to drive.
Yeah, the thinking being that he's actually doing what they think the car is capable of, and Max is the difference. He's the one outperforming the car.
No.
Or was.
I think the gulf between them is too big for it to only be down
to justify.
That's certainly part of it. It's definitely part of it, I think. Like, Max pulls results out of nowhere with cars that shouldn't be doing them. It's one thing that makes him so great. But yeah, I think it's a bigger gap than that. I think it's probably like a double-edged sword. It's like, that's the wrong phrase, but it's
a double blunt sword.
It's a problem in two parts. It's like
Yeah.
Max is doing way more with that car than it probably should be able to do at the same time as Perez is suffering a decline. So that gap's just getting wider and wider.
Yeah. Not much to add there, really. I think we've bashed Perez enough now for one episode. Shall we do some predictions?
Yeah, let's do the predictions. Right, so we'll go through ours first, and then I'll give everyone the details of how they can get involved. So, fastest in Q3. Chris, I'm going to go to you first on this one.
Leclerc,
interesting.
he did it last year, and he's probably got a better car this year. So,
Stu, are you going with a Ferrari man, a McLaren man, or someone completely different?
I think I'll go Norris for a difference. But I think it's very tight between those two. Well, I think it's very tight between a few of them. My heart says Norris, though.
I think I'm probably with you on this one, Stu, because, like we said earlier, technically the McLaren was probably the faster car overall in Monza, so I can see it being a fast car here against the Ferrari. So I will go Norris as well for fastest in Q3, but I will flip things a little bit and say Leclerc for the win. Because I think that what Chris was saying about, how we see the Ferrari being quite good on those slow speed corner, getting the power down out of those kind of exits, led to it being kind on its tyres in Monza compared to everybody else, which is a weird thing to say about a Ferrari, to be honest, because usually you're saying the exact opposite about a Ferrari in recent years, how hard they are on the tyres. So I think that could potentially play in their favour in terms of a race pace, allowing them to potentially push a bit more, maybe do something a little bit counter strategy-wise, like what they did in Monza. So I'm going to go for a Ferrari race win with Leclerc. How about you, Stu? Go backwards.
We haven't really mentioned Mercedes at all this race in terms of like how they fit into the current ranking. And I can see this one as a bit of a wild card. I can see Russell having a decent time here, but it's tough. I think I'm going to go with the double Norris for this one, because I'd like to say Piastri, because Norris struggles to keep leads off of pole. But I do think if Piastri is ahead for this one, then and Norris is right behind him, they'll switch him around.
Right. So despite what we were saying before about being harder to swap them for the win,
I still think they'll do it. I think they've finally seen sense. I think if they don't do it this race, if the opportunity comes this race and they don't do it, then they'll not do it for the rest of the season.
Yeah, fair. And Chris, what about you?
I think I'm just quickly wondering which of the two of them. I think Piastri is probably a better street track driver than Norris is based on recent form.
But will they let him win?
Will they let him win? Will he be in a position to win?
I mean, it depends, because Chris has got Leclerc on pole here. So if Piastri's jumping Leclerc near the start of the race and Leclerc's sandwiched between the McLarens, then they've got no chance to swap them anyway.
I think I am going to go Norris, actually. I think based on qualifying form, I think Norris is going to qualify ahead of Piastri, and that'll be enough.
Yeah, I think so too.
First DNF, I'll go to you first, Stu, because you've been in the middle for the last couple.
Verstappen, just for banter. I think that'd be fun. I think he's going to qualify, there is theory. I think he's going to qualify somewhere where he's not used to being in recent... Well, he's probably getting used to it by now, but I think he's going to be in the thick of it this time round, and I think there's a lot of risk involved, and I think that points gap could potentially come down quite a lot. I'd like to see... I want to see that points gap get down, and then them all start taking chunks out of each other, and suddenly everyone being in the mix. If Max Verstappen retires any race, then Leclerc is in the mix for a championship.
Yeah.
So, it's an exciting prospect. So let's say Verstappen just for bants.
Okay. Chris?
I'm going to be cruel and say Colapinto.
Oh, that's exactly what I was going to do. I was thinking walls everywhere, second race with the team. Do you know what? I'll be cruel in another. Oh no, I can't. I can't do this. No, I was going to say Bearman, but I can't do that.
Can't bring
because I know where I want him to be. So
I think it's a Stroll or if it's not a Verstappen, it's not going to be Verstappen, obviously. But I've made that prediction now, so if it is, great.
do you know? I'm going to go a random Alpine.
It's Joe. You're going for an Alpine. Oh,
pick a number 1 or
good.
2. I'll technically let one of you two decide which it is.
2.
2 was Gasly. So there you go.
Okay.
So that's that. Number of finishers. I'll go first. I mean, we've seen tyre issues here before. We've seen bounciness here before. We've seen accidents into walls and people trying to squeeze through corners. This shouldn't be side by side. So I can see a fair few DNFs and stragglers. I'm going to go 16 finishers for me. Chris, how about you?
It's been really high this season, number of finishers. Did you know we're on a 7-race streak without a safety car now?
Wow.
This season.
Oh, that's definitely going to end this race.
Yeah, that's got to end this weekend.
Yeah.
I'd be very surprised if it doesn't.
I'll go 17, I think.
Okay, and Stu?
I'll go 18, please.
Okay. And then last one. I think with Random Driver, we're going to play things a little bit different, and it won't be quite so random, but it still kind of will be random in the sense that we're going to draw Ollie Bearman out because it's a one chance to throw an extra driver in the mix. When we've got more drivers than we have racers, why not predict the one-off position, the one-off driver's position? So let's do it. Bearman. I mean, I alluded to it before that we might be doing this because I said I know where I want him to finish. I'm going to suggest that he maybe scrapes a point in 10th because the Haas has not looked too bad. I think Hülkenberg would have been on for an even better result than Magnussen had he not had the issues they had at the start of Monza. Even Magnussen managed to score a point in 10th despite everything that went on. So I'm going to give Bearman some positive support and say that he'll come home in 10th for a point. Stu?
11th.
Ooh, just outside. And Chris?
I'd love you to be right, Tom. I think it's going to be... I'll say 12th.
Okay. No one as optimistic as me then.
No, I reckon he'll beat like an Aston Martin.
Yeah.
Not his teammate, something like that.
That's fair. Right, so that rounds off our predictions. If you want to get involved, be sure to head to backofthegrid.com where you can register even if you've not played before, which is always worth doing on a race weekend because anyone who scores 5 out of 5 for a perfect weekend is eligible for a prize. So be sure to do that.
And it's suddenly got a lot more difficult, thankfully.
Oh, yeah. Thankfully for us,
5.
it's definitely got harder. But yeah, definitely worth doing. And obviously, if you've already been involved previously, you can check things like the leaderboards for where you are at the overall standings on the website. There'll also be links on there to both our fantasy leagues. We do one through Grid Rival and one through the official F1 Fantasy. So be sure to join both of those if you want to get involved with that. We did inbox early, so that's a weird way for us to end the podcast here, because normally I'd have been saying something about inbox, but we've done that bit. So enjoy the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, and we'll be back next week to review whatever goes down. See you then. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.